Race Rules, What Your Black Friends Won't Tell You, is the title of a new book that is essentially a manual for white people aimed at disrupting racism and helping create anti-racist workplaces and communities. The writer is a black woman uniquely positioned to share her experiences when interacting with those who don't realize that she's black. Joining us today is author, attorney, and CEO of the Azara Group, Fatimah Gilliam. Very nice to meet you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to talk with you today.
This is a book in my business that we call a talker, believe me. Growing up a black woman, I recognize it all, and I suspect a lot of people do. I want to talk about the fact, I said in the intro to you that you are uniquely positioned. And some of that is because some people don't realize that you're black, so they are saying things to you and around you that suggests, or they think you're kind of part of the club.
It happens all the time. I mean, people don't recognize or realize that I'm black. I mean, talk about white people mostly, and they say all kinds of sometimes very terrible things. Or people also assume that one of my parents is black. Nope, both parents. One of my grandparents. Nope, all four grandparents are black. And my family's been here for nearly 400 years. But the access that I have to some of these conversations was part of the catalyst for writing this book.
And because you felt like you could enlighten folks, really on both sides of the issue.
Right. I mean, I'll tell you how the book came about. So I was watching the news one day, and it was another story of a Karen going viral. And as I watched this news story, I thought of several different things. I thought of the rinse and repeat questions that I've gotten in my professional career or from friends or in connection with my diversity consulting work. And I also thought about the things that white people say around me when they don't realize I'm black. And I had an aha moment. I was like, oh, white people need a manual. And so I decided to write that manual and say the quiet part out loud. It is a unapologetically unvarnished truth book because I think that people can learn and need to learn from somebody finally telling them the truth. And so that's what I decided to do, courageously raising my hand to say the unvarnished truth.
When you say telling them the truth, in a lot of instances, the truth about why it is we have such a difficult time discussing issues of race in this country. Not just talking about it, but actually listening to each other and hearing what's being said.
I mean, I think, you know, what can happen a lot of times, you could have two people having a encounter together, right? You could have a white person and let's say a black person, and they have the same conversation and they walk away with two completely divergent views of what transpired. The white person may walk away and say, oh, I think we're cool with each other. Maybe there was a misunderstanding, but everything is okay. Meanwhile, the black person could feel like, okay, you marginalized me during that conversation, you offended me, I felt like there was something racist that happened in that conversation. I am not looking forward to the next time you're going to be in the meeting at work or at my friend's barbecue. And so what I'm trying to do is explain these are things that you did that were offensive to us. And by saying that and sharing that, then somebody can say, oh, I need to do differently. I need to do better.
Is it a matter of racism being so ingrained in so much of what we do in this country that you know, people have a hard time, either they're going to feel guilty, that's the fear, they're going to feel guilty, or they're going to be guilty, or they're going to make somebody mad, so we all just stay in our corners. And then we never truly we never truly see each other. You've said it. We'll say, I'm colorblind. And you say, that's actually offensive and not
racist.
A good thing, you know?
Right, colorblindness ideologies are entrenched in erasure, right? So a lot of times when somebody, speaking as like a white person says, well, I'm colorblind, I don't see color. What they're actually saying is that my color is not negatively impacting me. And in saying that, then I'm negating the fact that color is impacting you. And so that's why people should not think about being in this sort of color blindness zone. Instead, they should be color conscious, color aware, so that they can solve some of the challenges in society. And in terms of color blindness, I personally get really irritated when people hijack the words of Martin Luther King every, mid-January, talking about this color blindness that he actually did not believe in. He was for reparations, he was for affirmative action, but people use that to then say, well, we don't need to progress any further.
Yeah, I think it's become a shorthand for that. I don't want to talk about this anymore. So talk to me about some of the rules that you lay out in your guidebook.
Well, I have so I've written my book, right? I've written my book in a way that I say it's sort of like a choose your own race knowledge adventure. So you can hop around. So it's very different from a lot of books on race, right? So a lot of books will either talk about how racism shows up in society, maybe it'll have a lot of history in there, and then what? Right?
What do I do?
I'm focused on the then what, right? Because I'm in the advice game and I want to help people make better decisions. So I've written it for what I call the lazy reader. There are illustrations, there are translation charts. You said this, we heard this, why don't you say this instead? But I have all kinds of chapters so that people can use it in their personal and professional life. So I talk about calling the police for no reason, tokenization, colorblindness, cultural appropriation, how to apologize, conversations around race, how you need to educate yourself, you know, before coming to people of color with questions. So it's a broad range of topics trying to help people and give them very specific advice.
Now you have this is one of the things that irritates the heck out of me. You talk a lot about the use of the N-word in the book by anyone, quite frankly. But especially those, this is the thing that makes the top of my head blow out. I've actually had friends will say, well, you said it, why couldn't I say it? Not to me, but they said it. Because I'm like, I won't answer that question anymore, and that's the way to make me not even recognize you as a human being, because I know you know what the issue is. Why are we still having this conversation about this? What is it about that word that people have such a difficult time of letting go of, and still don't get it, why it's offensive in any context?
I mean, it strikes at the heart of white supremacy in this country and how we have this society of a racialized caste system. In the book, I say I don't think that anybody should use this term, but what I will say, like you say, you have these conversations with people and you get tired of these conversations. You know, one of the reasons why I also wrote the book, like the you in my writing is to a white person, but it's for our benefit. And I see it helping people of color to bring words to the conversations that you're having, talking points. And then I also consider this a please go away book, right? So you don't want to continue to have the conversation about the N-word.
Right,
and then you can say, you know what, Fatimah covered that. That's race rule number 9. Check it out. You know, because I got a life to live.
Exactly. Leave me alone. That's a nice way of saying it, though. That's not generally what I say. That is not generally what I say. You know, I'm curious. You know, okay, you're going to get me in trouble, and I'm going to have to come work for you. I was laughing at my own self. You wrote this book you saved for white people. Honestly, do you imagine white people buying this book?
I do. And I imagine people of color gifting it to the neighbor, to their uncle, maybe the person that they're even married to, right? Or someone at work, that they're tired of having these conversations or they want to be treated in a different kind of way. But yes, there are white people that have bought this book and white people that have endorsed the book.
I mean, and the book, honestly, it's straightforward. You pull no punches. But it's not a mean, it really is educational. I want to ask you, one of the things you talk about is how racism hurts both white people and people of color. Talk to me a little bit about that.
There are lots of examples that we can see, right? So there's the business case for diversity, right? That companies that are more diverse have higher return on investment, you know, better shareholder value, lower turnover rate for employees, right? That have economic value and benefit for their company, right? So there's an economic aspect of it. I think America's competitive advantage globally is our diversity that we're not tapping, right? But then we have these things that happen in society where we harm ourselves. We engage in self-harm because we want to maintain a racialized caste system. An example would be in the last presidential election and the dismantling of our postal service, right? So we didn't, you know, some people didn't want everyone to be able to vote. So what did they do? They started removing mailboxes. They started dismantling the machines that sort the mail. And what does that do? That impacts interstate commerce. That impacts somebody getting their Social Security check or their veterans benefits or their medicine in the mail, which hurts everyone regardless of race. But doing it because they don't want some people to vote, and we know who those some people are.
Yeah. Your point here really is that we need to talk to each other, listen to each other, and we can make these changes to really, what you're asking white people to do is to really look at the history of the country, to really understand where people of color are coming from. And to see that there is history. I mean, there is, you know, evidence-based history there that tells you there's a reason people are angry and upset and afraid.
Well, I even have a rule, like, you know, people of color are entitled to their anger and rage. And I explain that. And I do lay out the history, too, in my white welfare chapter, where I coined a new term, white welfare, that I say it's the ultimate entitlement program for white people, giving them a sense of entitlement to limitless winning and opportunity hoarding.
And you don't just say that. You lay out
Yes.
the proof of that, whether you start from, what is it, the GI Bill? I mean...
Right. I break it down and
them.
have the illustration to go with it. But the other thing that I'll say too, Sandra, is what I'm also trying to do is get people to broaden how they think of racism, right? Part of the definition, because people will think, oh, a racist is just the person that shows up at the supermarket with the AR-15, engages in hate crimes, and shoots everyone, as opposed to, you know, which then makes people say, well, it's all over there, right? It's never at home.
Yeah.
It's never my neighborhood. It's never my, you know, where I work. And instead, I want people to look within. It's when somebody says, you know, I don't think they're the right culture fit for this organization.
Yeah.
Or they start talking about qualifications when they're talking about people of color, but merit when they talk about white people. Or they don't want to change the tax code that funds schools, which then creates a segregated society, right? So I want people to broaden it, and I want people to stop engaging in these hearts and minds ideologies, right? Like, well, oh, I think it's bad. Okay, well, it's great that you think it's bad. What are you doing about it?
What are you going to do? Be part of the solution.
Right.
I mean, you do point out everyone is prejudiced, but not everyone's racist.
Correct.
Yeah. And you have to think about that.
Because who has the power?
Yeah.
Right? It's the systems and the structures, right? Because everyone is prejudging people all of the time. But right, like if, and they have different impacts. If I prejudge a police officer, for example, right, because of the way that they have a terrible history of engaging with people of color, okay, so I just thought poorly of this police officer. But if the cop prejudges me, and we're assuming we're talking about a white cop, then that has deadly consequences.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. It's a perfect example.
Yeah.
Race Rules, What Your Black Friend Won't Tell You. It is worth a read for everyone. And also, I want to send the Azara Group, which is your company.
Correct.
That you founded, and you help companies deal with some of these issues, especially when we're talking about diversity, inclusion, and equity, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI, which is really how, especially in the workplace, you get at some of these issues.
Correct. And I think, you know, even this book being the unvarnished truth, this can help people in the workplace so that they can have more authentic, more positive relationships with people of color. And it's essential to understand other people so that you can start building trust. So I recommend the book.
Well, of course you do, and so do I. It is just, it is really a manual, and it is easy to hop around because there's some things that jump out to you where you've had the experiences in your life, so you really want to go to that point to focus on what you do next time you find yourself in that situation.
Right, I mean, people need advice at the end of the day. They want guardrails of like, what should I do, what should I not do, what is offensive? And honestly, some people who will read this book may not even care about the whole rationale behind it. They just want someone to tell them, like, what should I not do to hurt someone or be offensive? And I will take that, because as they start changing their behavior, eventually it sinks in why they shouldn't be doing that in the first place.
All right. Fatimah Gilliam, so nice to talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's our pleasure. We'll be right back.